So I was thinking of this as more of a conversational thing where we can basically have a therapy session, a live therapy session. So I think one of the things that, particularly for new founders, to pay really close attention to how many times the team members are mentioned and how many and what a drastic impact it can make upon the dynamics of the team, the personality differences, how well they vibe, if they trust. That's the number one thing. You can go very, very far with people that have totally different personalities, but the one issue that I would really, really concentrate is on building trust. And that has to be done organically. There are a lot of sources and resources out there. I love the book, The 5 Dysfunctions of the Team, which is what something that was taught to me in my MBA program at WashU, amongst other books. But there's some nice surveys in there that you can really gauge how well people work together, and what they need to feel comfortable and safe in the environment, because it is a very, very volatile environment. One day you're on a high, the next day you're on the lowest of lows. But I heard a really nice analogy. Anytime that you have a really high, you're going to need to counter it with a low. It's like a heartbeat. And the last thing that any founder needs is a flat line. So anytime you get one of those highs, anticipate the lows, but just know it will come back and it will even out and there's a high again. And that's part of the beauty of being a founder. And if you are not prepared for that, and you're not prepared for financial risk, then this isn't going to be the right fit. And so, especially right now in today's capital environment. So I'll just throw some lessons that I learned right from the get-go. I'll put a fail right out there. Early on, we're bringing to market porous devices that draw stem cells inside the devices for orthopedic and spine surgery. And we not only benefit from that aspect, but there's also options that never before existed in hardware. And so we're going to be treating therapeutically. Hopefully we'll get our FDA clearance on that, to be the first company to therapeutically treat orthopedic and spine fractions and fusion sites. So so I know I've been in the industry for 20 years. I've reached out to some colleagues that really are big names in the industry that have done very big things, and they have their team. They have get provided advice, and I tell you what, the best thing I ever did was listen to them. When one of those founders told me, he said, "Alyssa, you know what? I kind of regret giving you this contact. I really don't think that you should reach out." But I had already reached out to the person, and the person was already interested, and the person was very, very knowledgeable. So I went forward because of how knowledgeable they were in a very new environment, and we developed something together. We went out to meet one of our key opinion leaders, show the technology. And when we got back, because we only had an NDA in place, it was just theory. Can we do this? When they got back, we were on the phone with my attorney, or the company's attorney. The company invested in, or our attorney invested in our company. And he said, "Well, if you don't make me CEO, then I'm going to take the IP." And so I was like, okay, I sketched this out in 2009. It's 10 years later, and I come to you as a favor and make you a co-founder and give you equity. I mean, we were all in negotiations and stuff, but now you want to be the CEO. I just spent $150,000 on my MBA to become the CEO of my company, to bring this to life. And so I think if there's no greater thing to learn from this, know who you're working with and have your attorney put something in place before they realize conceptually how good of an idea it is. And so I'll pass the mic. Elizabeth has a short story to share as well.
Billy had a question. He says,
Oh, yeah.
What attorney threatened you?
Oh, it wasn't the attorney. I'm sorry. It was the engineer. So we were on a Zoom call with the individual, the company attorney, and myself. And the engineer said after meeting with the key opinion leader, and realizing how big of an opportunity this could be for people and for physicians alike and hospitals alike, then all of a sudden he wanted to be the CEO. And he had no CEO experience, keep in mind, but he had been at a C-suite level. So
The very first thing you said was the more you talk about the team. What did you mean by that?
So my attorney was like, Alyssa, we have your back. We're good. Don't worry. Everything, don't worry. That right there, when you find people like that, and Patty Williams is our attorney out of St. Louis, Missouri. She's also a fellow alum. That's how I met her, was through the entrepreneurial program there. When you have people that have your back, it is ride or die. They are with you all the way, and only time and trials and tribulations can find that, can weed out the ones that are in it for themselves. But there's an ultimate, an unseen force behind teams, especially in startups, that you just feel it. You feel the trust within the team. You feel the excitement and the motivation and the struggles. And once they've gone through it, it's kind of like a marriage. People that stick together and they get better together will survive together. Does that make sense?
Yeah, you're saying that the team is everything, and that's kind of the essence of this little coffee clash we have here.
Yeah. They'll rescue you. And if you let them, but you have to be willing to let them. You can't be a know-it-all. My number 2 thing is, when you interview people or when you talk to people, my biggest thing is to know what their weaknesses are. I've found that if people think that they're experts in everything, then it gets you in big trouble down the line. So, it could get you into big trouble. We pivoted very quickly, but if they think they're an expert in IP, legal, engineering, human resources, blah, 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 all because they've had maybe executive positions or C-suite positions, they're wrong. Nobody can have that level of experience. And I always like to work with people that go, you know what, that's probably not my forte, but I think we should really hire somebody as a consultant for this or as an employee. And so, does that make sense?
You said Elizabeth is something to contribute.
Yes, and I love Leek's comment. All engineers are such lovable persons.
Can't live with them, and you can't live without them.
Yeah.
In this world, yeah.
We get very lucky. We get very lucky. Matthew Schomper and John Bonek really saved my company. And so I got very lucky. They're wonderful to work with, but I've had a few that have not been wonderful. But go ahead.
So what I wanted to share as far as being a founder and bringing a zero technology device to the market, a place that I have learned a lot, and it has to do with engineering. It has to do with the design of the product. So I spent many years, like 7 years, I mean, a long time, with engineers designing. This is a great idea. No, we got to redesign. And I met with a mentor who had been successful in his own medical device company. And he said to me, you need to stop designing, go build this product and test it. He literally got in my face and said, stop the design work. You will never get the design work where you need it to be. And I took that advice and ran with it. And it was a pivotal moment in the company. So I said, okay, I told my 3 engineers, we're going to stop designing. We're going to go build this product and go test it. So we did that. We did a pilot study. It was presented at the American Heart Association national meeting. Fast forward, I just learned 2 days ago, that we have been accepted with our current design, to be on the agenda for the ISO meeting in Paris in December of this year. So I have lots of stories and lots of legal stories and lots of team building stories, but my story that I wanted to share here was about the design work and spending all of this time trying to get this perfect product when we didn't know if it was going to work in the market or not. So it was go build it, let's test it and move on from there.
I'd like to ask Rick Stockton what he thinks of that anecdote.
I was writing down some notes on that.
I know you were.
Yeah. And there's a place where you do have to find out if the product is actually going to work. And it's not always transparently clear where that place is. But when you have a certain number of questions and you start finding yourself doing one design scenario after another to possibly address needs that you're not sure of, then it's definitely time to start testing. You probably won't be done with it at that point in time, but at least you'll have solid knowledge to build on.
That's true, and that's exactly what happened.
Chris Kelly, anything to add there?
Because I got in here late, so I'm not sure if this was ever mentioned, but I worked on a project at Care Fusion that when I came in as a consultant, they sat me down after 1 week because I didn't know anything, which meant I was the perfect crash test dummy to put in front of this UI
Dummy. Go on.
and see if I could navigate it. And thank God for this woman named Sybil, who they had brought in as a human factors engineering expert, who literally got in the VP's face and said, I will go to the CEO if you don't run these tests to make sure what you designed is what the actual users can make sense of. And they had designed it. She was proving a point by taking what they had designed in the UI. They thought this was where they were going to go to market. And they had never sat down and had nurses and doctors go through and navigate it. So I'm the new guy and can you add a pump? I couldn't do anything. And I thought I was screwing up. Like here I'm this expert on testing and I can't navigate. And when we're all done, they said, you passed. We're going to scrap the whole thing because nobody designed it from the user's perspective. It was from the engineer's perspective. And that epiphany. So that was what, 2014. And that is just in my head right now. So what you guys are talking about, I 100% agree with. It's got to be from the end user's perspective. And then you just start testing until you get it to work. Otherwise, analysis paralysis turns it into forever.
Gunjan, did you have something?
Yes. So as a mechanical engineer by training, I want to defend engineers in general, but the point that Elizabeth and Chris made is absolutely right. Before I agreed to be an advisor to Alyssa's company, I was working with a friend as an advisor for his startup, and he wanted to make the perfect product. I said, okay, that should take 3 months. Well, 9 months in, he was still trying to perfect it. And I said, you've got to get customers, you got to get it in front of customers, otherwise you're just wasting your time. And he wouldn't listen. Another 3 months went by and I said, goodbye, I'm bailing out of here. And this was a few months ago. He's still sitting there perfecting a product that I know nobody will ever pay for. And this is really, I think, more than an engineer's issue, this is a founder's issue very often.
Exactly.
They fall in love with the product and they feel like they need to keep improving it. Yes, that's true. But unless somebody is going to pay for the product, it doesn't matter. And you know,
Aren't you guys really talking about prototyping and getting it in front of people?
prototyping, getting it in front of people, and if it's a software product, you can start selling it. It can
Right.
be, you can't do that with a medical device, of course. But if it's software, you can actually get people to use an imperfect product for some time, and they will tell you how to improve it.
Right.
Get that feedback. Yes. So it's prototyping, but it's more than prototyping. It's really, as Chris said, getting into the end user's mind and making sure that their needs are met. They may have a trivial issue that's easy for an engineer to solve. So they don't want to work on the trivial stuff. They want to work on the tough problems. But sometimes it's the easy ones that add incremental value and incremental revenue. And why not do those?
I want to just say, I completely agree that in my situation, it was the founder, it was me. That I had 3 different engineers and I'm not an engineer. I don't have an MBA. I don't have a law degree. I have certain things, great intuition, and I understood what had to be, but there's no question, you're 100% right. It was my problem that I didn't stop this iteration that went on for a couple of years. So thank you.
Bobby, I know you've had a hand in a company or two.
What I was going to say is that there are what I think of as 2 different types of people in the world when it comes to startup companies. There are people that are visionaries and there are people that are operations people. On rare occasions, you have somebody that can wear both hats, or can appear to wear both hats. But we all have a bent one way or another. We're either the visionary or we're the operations person that gets stuff done. And the visionary wants to make their baby beautiful, and the operations person wants to make the baby sellable and make some money so it survives and it doesn't die. So those two have to work together. And so you see a lot of times when you see partners, and it might not even be the original founding partners, it might be like the CEO hired a COO to help them get shit done. And they
Language.
make a great team, but either one by themselves would never get the company off the ground, because the visionary points the boat in the right direction and the operations person tells people when to row. And that you need both pieces. And it's a very classic problem. And occasionally you have somebody that can wear both hats, but it's a rare thing. And usually they're not as good at one as they are at the other. So I think we all need to sort of be self-aware of what our strengths and weaknesses are. I mean, I know I was just talking with one of my team members today. It was like, if I'm in charge of this project, the client will fall behind schedule. But if you're in charge of this project, it will get done on time. So I'm going to write the proposal and I'm going to land the client as a new client for us, but you're going to do all the work.
Billy Haynes is driving. He asks the group, what is the best background for a good chief operating officer?
Great question.
You know, in my experience, I'll take this one. In my experience, my COO is phenomenal. Her name is Carla Newman. And the reason why I think she's so phenomenal is before I even knew her personality, she was recommended, first of all, by somebody on our team. Second of all, she's been part of multiple acquisitions from a medical device standpoint, and she acted as the CFO and the COO. So within some of those companies, she's also a board member for the Hertz Foundation. So there's several factors in there. Prudence. So I'm the visionary. I'm the one where I can get in the weeds because it is my baby. I can write the grants and I've had to do it all up front. So letting go those reins and trusting that it's going to get done perfectly or as close to perfectly as possible. It takes something for a founder to do that. I'm good with regards to sales. I have a sales and distribution background. So I understand the concept of perception is reality, and you can really over-engineer a product. So we work really well. My team and I work really well together because they trust me to go. We just had this discussion. We're choosing between two products. And I go, first of all, there's data behind one. There's just concrete data. The other one is in theory. Second of all 5 of our KOLs, their first choice was this. So their perception is what we should go with, because let's say they only see, we don't have access to millions and millions of people unless we pay millions and millions of dollars in advertising. So if they see an image of it and it doesn't translate within their mind within those few seconds, then we've just developed an over-engineered product. They have to be able to look at it. And so my COO, back to the point, is my COO trusts me that I've been in the industry long enough and I have that sales and distribution background along with the vision background. And so that's another point, that you have to have sales involved immediately, because they're the ones that are going to be asking questions and they're the ones that are going to the key opinion leaders, and they're going to also know who those key opinion leaders are, who your targets are. Sales and marketing, somebody that has both of that, and which I did. I had sales and marketing experience in orthopedics and spine and biologics. So if you can find me combined with a COO with a lot of prudence, there's a personality profile that I highly recommend taking. I'll put it in the chat once I remember it, but it said I was lower on the prudence end. So I knew that I needed somebody that I knew that about me already. That's why I went and got my MBA, was to figure out a little bit of what I don't know. But to find somebody that complements me in that department, that's Carla, nail on head. And so it's a really nice dynamic. We had a question in the chat.
Chris was commenting on Rob that he has a similar situation where if he and his business partner transpose roles, they'd be out of business very quickly.
Yeah.
It's the same scenario that Alyssa was talking about and Rob and his business partner. If I ran operations, we'd be out of business. It's just, I've done it. I had to do it in early days and I sucked at it. And bringing Tim on board from advisory board to GM and PMO, wow. Not only did our company grow faster, but all our team members were so much happier. And you have to just set your ego aside and say, yep, I suck at that. And I really want this company to succeed. So I need to get the hell out of the way. And it's not easy to do, but it gets easier over time.
Sue, I want to ask you about your
apologize.
journey, about how I'm thinking that your risk profile as an established pharmacist to go and say, I'm going to go design something, raise capital, and become the founder of a company. How did that come to pass?
I want to thank Alyssa and for everything that she said, and also Elizabeth. I don't see her on here. Oh, there you are. Because everything they said resonated with me, and it's a part of me. It actually started when I was a pharmacy technician going to pharmacy school, and I first saw the problem. And after pharmacy school, I went and worked retail and managed and opened CVS's for many, many years, and went back to hospital. And then I was a clinical hospital pharmacist, which is a totally different job than a retail pharmacist. You have to use your mind in a whole different way with calculations and checking their renal and hepatic function, and ICU and NICU. I worked there, and oncology, and it's very detailed and very complicated, and each is a case by case, but you feel like you're making a difference. But in ICU, I noticed that they weren't using filter needles. And then I went to a new hospital, and I was in that position where I had to filter an ampule for a critical patient at the floor for the doctor, and everybody's staring at me while I'm drawing it up. And I looked for a filter needle, and they all looked at me like I was crazy and grabbed the needle out of my hand. So that's when I was already, bootstrapping my way through 2 patents and almost ready to jump off the cliff. But it was a scary jump. It really was. I held my breath, and I, started a log diary, and it starts out, you kind of hit rock bottom to go back up. And I had performed my first pitch, and it went horribly wrong. And I thought I was like sunk for it. And I didn't know what I was getting into. I didn't know what I was doing. But through accelerators and incubators, I learned, and I took courses on how to speak. I still hate speaking in public, but I'm getting better at it. And so I guess, that's all you can do is get better. And everybody, like, I went to an event last night, and they're going, oh, the rock star. And I'm really not, and I don't have a big head, but other people think I am. So you kind of have to fake it till you make it too. Right. And so I don't know how it just kind of like unfolded. And then I realized that I filmed a video for a Nova personalized health accelerator, and I showed it to my patent attorney, who showed it to who's now my corporate attorney, and he came on, and then we formed the legal structure of Cartech, and it started there. And then I had reached out, I met Galero, they're out of the Research Triangle area, through another person when I went to, who was in this road sling, a big, well, it's all precision medical products back then, but it was a big manufacturing company. And I said, can you build my little frog? And they're like, no, we can't. You have to start over. And that was rock bottom. So there's been a lot of highs. There's a lot of lows. And so you kind of have to balance it out. I mean, I think I'm more low than high, but I don't let anybody see that part of me.
So you make a great point about patents. People, one thing that I would think that should always be put on the table is there's such a thing as freedom to operate. Patents aren't as valuable as people make claims that they are, because they're so easy to work around. And I spoke with the CEO of a big company that said, I can get past patents all day long. Patents don't bother me. He goes, but what you've done, and this is another pearl, is getting investors that are actually within the industry and are manufacturing partners, but you're not obligated to use them. That's very valuable from an acquisition standpoint and from a pivoting standpoint, who's going to be more invested in making sure that you get that prototype out, or that not necessarily a prototype, the final finished product out faster. So we have a 1-week turnaround on our product. That doesn't happen, but it only happens because we have investors. And Michelle made a great point in the chat. Michelle, you want to?
Sure. I was saying that Rob and I joke and text each other every time we get a new client with like the title of co-CEO. And like what a mess that makes. You know, it's already in the startup, kind of hard to know who's wearing what hat, because you know, sometimes everybody has to do everything. But if you've got co-CEOs, not only do you have like kind of conflict built into the role, but you really don't know who's doing what.
Yeah, and also there's I've encountered this where people that will ride through it with you are people that have a financial vested interest, but you want to make sure that those people don't have a lot of overlap. So because it's very easy to get very emotional quickly. And that leads me down to another pearl. Do not ever be on a team where the loudest voice wins. It will always lead you down the wrong path. And so I'm sure everybody on here already knows that. But as a pearl, I've seen, and this was even in school, whenever we would vote on things, when there was a lot of overlap, your blinders wouldn't be taken off. And when you have a person on it's the team's job to calm that person down to a level that everybody has almost like a democratic vote. The problem with the democratic side of things is it slows the process down, but you make better decisions. So there's a fine balance between that.
I wanted to ask Michael, I believe among all the founders on the call, your company is youngest. You're in the earliest stages of development. And I'm asking you to ask the group what kind of watchouts that you might not yet be aware of, or other things you might be struggling with right now and trying to get past.
Excellent. Thanks, Joe. Yeah, actually, well, maybe we're the youngest. We're about 16 months. We've already gone through 3 different prototypes. We've made our products first, minimal viable products first. We're right now getting into preclinical trials, and we're going to be looking to raise in the next 2 months. Now, my cookies aren't completely baked yet, so I don't know what things to recommend not to do, being the youngest. But if you've ran into problems in those situations, or actually more pearls, as Alyssa's actually mentioned, that'd be actually very helpful.
So one on that note, a really nice pearl, and please everyone jump in, is people will work in exchange for equity with no cost. And some of the best in the world will, if they believe in the idea. And that's a really good test, a really good gauge about if you have a viable product. Mm-hmm. So for example, there's a researcher out there called Professor Bill Walsh. He's in Australia. He literally wrote the ASTM standard for my device that you submit to the FDA for mechanical testing. He's a world-renowned researcher. I'm a total nerd. I love his research. And so I reached out to him via LinkedIn and I said, can I have 15 minutes of your time? I have an idea. And I cited some papers. I can't remember, but I think I cited some papers of his where I really thought that it could be, his intel could be valuable on it. And he said, sure. And he got on a call and we Zoomed in 15 minutes. He was in, he's an advisor for us. And my KOL, the first KOL, Dr. Khoi Tan, I did the same thing with him on LinkedIn. Now, granted, this was several years ago. There's not as much spam back then, but 15 minutes in, yeah, I could use this. I have a patient right now. I think this is brilliant. What do you need me to do? And our KOLs, Zach Ray, Khoi Tan, and Aleko Steologis sat every other Sunday for half an hour to an hour helping me write a grant. So that's another point. There's free money out there if you prove, and don't do what I did. and I was warned by, and this is a good fail. I was warned by my KOL team, for your phase 1 grant, just say that you're trying to test the product to see its viability. Don't go all out. Just use that 287,000, I think, allotment to test your product. And but because there's basically a year after you apply is when you get your money, if you get approved. I don't get a check for a year, and I'm like, well, we'll already know that the product works, so it would be just a waste of money by then. Well, that's not true. We were a year later, and we had to do a redesign. So it's again, I didn't listen to my team. I thought I listened to an engineer, but that engineer fell through. And so I should have, if I was smart, and this is the one thing that I think all CEOs should really take advantage of: trust your team, let them guide you, but always have your intuition. Your intuition is your best. There's nothing that will ever compensate for intuition, nothing. And so as long as everybody feels like it's a safe enough environment to put all cards on the table, as a CEO, you can go, all right, I made this educated decision. I have all my blinders off as much as I can. And if I feel like I don't have enough blinders off, I reach out to the advisors, I reach out to Gunjan, I reach out to experts in their field, and just say, hey, can I have 15 minutes of your time via LinkedIn message?
Marvin, you wrote very generously to us in the premium channel with some of your founder lessons. Would you share it with the group?
Thanks, Joe. Just put me on the spot there. Okay, so my very first experience as a founder in a startup was not in medtech at all. I was working on a project that was, the concept was Airbnb for fine art. And the reason is there's a lot of art that's in storage. Businesses can't expense fine art, but they could expense it as a rental, things like that. And the first mistake I made is I got really, really overinvested in issues of look and feel, and kind of how it would be perceived. And I did not pay very much attention, not nearly as much attention as I should have, to issues of just day-to-day operations. How do we handle the art? How do we document the art? How do we photograph the art? I was really concerned with making sure our logo and name were perfect. And so that was kind of the first mistake. And the reason I really made that first mistake is my second mistake. I was really mixing up my personal life and my business life. And that's because our graphic designer was my ex-wife. And I was really just emotionally very overcommitted to proving to the world that she and I could work together on a professional level.
So you're saying she produced a bad logo and you divorced her?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm saying. No, but the divorce was kind of fresh. And so I was just really committed to all of the suggestions that somebody who sits in the graphic designer chair wants to make, which is getting everything entirely perfect. Now, at the same time, I was really trying to think of the name. And so the concept was, let's keep art fresh, let's cycle through seasonally kind of what's new and in the moment, so that, hotel lobbies and law office, meeting rooms could have new and local and exciting art or stuff from museum collections. And so I went through a lot of names with this idea of swiping through, clicking through ideas, seasonality, cycling. And I'm not sure if it's that I refused to look deeply into the word I chose, or that if our graphic designer chose not to inform me of the decision, but this confluence of events, my overcommitment, my obsession with look and feel and not operations, led for a brief time to the Ratchet Company coming into existence in the state of Delaware. So the third lesson is that Urban Dictionary is very much your friend. And in naming a product, be aware of things that aren't part of the dictionary in picking how you'll comport yourself.
What is Ratchet on the Urban Dictionary? I think of Nurse Ratchet.
Oh, yeah, no, definitely not Nurse Ratchet. Think.
Shall we just look it up because it's impolite to say on camera?
It might be impolite. Think Midwestern sorority spring break trip with culturally inappropriate dreadlocks.
I'll go look it up. Thanks.
Okay.
Yeah. Did you buy any inventory of art
Oh,
Do you-
we had, oh yeah, we had a lot of, no, we were just using other people's inventory. We had a nice inventory, people's private collections.
Did you raise money on this idea?
Yeah.
How much, may I ask?
About $250,000.
Wow, okay.
That's fine.
Alright.
The insurance is really hard on that stuff. That ended up being the downfall.
So ratchet definition is calling someone ratchet has historically meant you think they have no class and lack a proper upbringing, but they don't know it. Example, trashy.
I
So
got the
to
same
call,
thing.
yeah, to call your company no class and trashy is pretty tough pill to swallow.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but you know, and that's another going to that.
Trashy.
Yeah. I mean, if you go on that, always look up before you it's before you fixate on an idea for a name, always look up trademarks, because and it's easily accessible. Just Google trademark registry and it'll pop up, and you can see if there's anything in your field that that has that. And then you can add things like we did 8. We added an 8 on the back of ours to modify it. And if there's nothing in healthcare and so on and so forth. So
I'd also say look and see if the URL is available.
yes, that's your first thing, really.
Oh, and also say if you are doing naming stuff right now, you've got to get ahead of the trademark office. We're working on, our stuff, and they are drastically behind. We put in our application for our name last October, and the current estimate is we're still 3 or 4 months away. What's normally a 3-month process. So
yeah. Everybody's really, the one great thing about COVID in that experience is if it mimics, history repeats itself. So after the industrial, we experienced the Industrial Revolution after the last pandemic. And so what we're seeing, I'm not the biggest economist in town. Nick should be on here for this one. But what the trend is we're seeing a lot of people start companies, and so all of these processes where you get approval, legal processes, they're very bogged down, and a lot of the capacity is very minimal. The last one thing, does anybody have any commentary on any of this? Feel free.
I've
Well, I
got
think
something
we
once
got the
we wrap up
founders.
this topic.
Okay.
Sorry, what?
So I've got something once we wrap up this particular topic.
In fact, when she was asking me to help kind of crowdsource this presentation, I sent her your red flags presentation, because I think a lot of that is particularly relevant here. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was very particular about being in love with your own product or your own science, and thinking that A, your customer is going to be, but B, especially for regulated products, that the FDA will be. Because I just see it all the time that people think it's obvious. Like for your product, you would think, well, duh, if you put stem cells in the screw or whatever, and they come out over time, it's going to just naturally happen. The FDA is going to automatically see that this is a great idea, and I'm not going to have to go through all the clinical trials, because they'll go from A to B and C and put A to C together, just like I did.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't happen.
Rob, you had your hand up?
Yes, it did. There is a company that people might have heard before. They're called Abbott Labs, little tiny company. They were my first consulting client. And during the interview process, I had a fever of 103, and I was pitching to them. And I had proposed to them, like, well, this company wants a recombinant DNA expert. Why? And I was at the division that makes baby food called Ross Products, Similac. And I was like, what in the world would somebody want to put this recombinant in baby food? And I said, well, there must be some sort of antiviral or something that they want to give babies. And I don't know what it is, but that's probably what they want to do. So here's how to make this antiviral recombinant product for this amount of money. And I said, maybe they need to make it in larger scale. So here's how to make it for this amount of money. And then here's how to make it for this amount of money. And I kept on working my way down to the cheapest that you could get per pound of recombinant product ever in the history of science. And this was back in the days when PowerPoint was a new concept. So this was all on acetate sheets. And I put my overhead up there, and I got my fever of 103, and because the room is dark, they can't really see that I'm sweating profusely. And I go through each of my slides, and they're like, And so then when the lights come back on, and they can, and it's time for them to do the Q&A, they say to me, that was a fantastic presentation. We have no idea how you did it, but you nailed exactly what we're trying to do. It's an antiviral recombinant product that we want to put in baby food. And I was like, really? And they said, yeah. And the only thing is, we would like to see the next slide. And I said, huh? They're like, yeah, whatever's the next cheapest after that last slide you presented. And I'm like, that was the cutting edge technology. Nobody's ever gotten cheaper than that before. Nobody, ever. It can't be done. And they're like, well, that's the slide we want to see. And I said, well, the smart consultant would leave now and laugh at you all the way home. But since I have a fever 103, what the hell? So I pulled out a Sharpie and a clear acetate sheet, and I drew the whole entire process for them. And then they hired me for the next 2.5 years to actually make it happen. I told them that was like, you are absolutely insane. This is crazy. This will never work. The FDA will never, ever, ever, ever approve a product that's recombinant DNA to put in baby food, and no mother would ever give it to their child. They're like, but it's going to cure all these things, and we won't have to vaccinate ever again. And I'm like, yeah. It's not going to be improved ever. There's no regulatory pathway for this. It just won't happen. But what I underestimated is that the Strategic Pediatric Research Fund was really large and was developed on a hunting trip. So it really didn't matter whether it was feasible or not. So I helped them do this crazy thing, got 60 kilos of this recombinant baby food additive that would never ever be approved. And the FDA laughed at them and said, yeah, no, you're out of your minds, but great work on developing that recombinant baby food.
I'm interested in, I would have found working on a project that I knew was impossible to be dispiriting. Yeah, ginger.
Oh, I had an absolute blast. It was so much fun doing the impossible, and of course we succeeded, but it was still
that it was impossible.
We
you learn a lot of other things while you're doing something that's impossible.
Oh yeah, like going to the moon. Like, you can't live there, but you can learn a lot of stuff on the way.
Rick, you had your hand up, then you took it down. You stated.
Yeah. It's I was balancing between notes and controls and everything else. But one thing, Marvin, on naming companies, when I was in automotive last century, somebody named a car the Nova, and of course they're trying to sell it down in Mexico,
which means it does not go.
Yeah, won't go. So that was one thing, but it's unfortunately, I'm a little embarrassed. Engineers are not looking very good in this particular session, but I can tell you that one of the things that I love doing most is working with the people who have the vision, because I found out a long time ago, as far as figuring out what products ought to be out there, that's not my lane. It's just not. Figuring out how to make them work, yes, and engineers sort of have the image of, well, we just want the facts, we just want this or that, and give us a bunch of specifications and we'll make it for you. But sometimes the most fun is when just somebody knows what they want it to do and what they want it to look like. And it may not even be possible, at least not apparently, but that's why I think I have 2 patents to my name, because everybody else always has these amazing ideas. And oh gosh, I have to page up in my notes, but the whole part about knowing what you do and knowing where your strengths and weaknesses are, I wouldn't even try to do what you guys are doing unless I got an idea that just infected me and it was so amazing. But I would but once you figure out what it is you want to do, whether there's a good way to do it or not, it's the thing I love to do is make sure that happens. And so it's a blast. But knowing your lane, that's so important.
Michael?
This is great.
Yeah, so I'll throw this one out there, and Billy Haynes, I'm glad to see you actually on here. I watched your video. I was unfortunately absent during those times. This question is also to Alyssa and any other founders are in process right now. in today's market where money is expensive, and I don't think Billy's video, but are you guys looking towards special purpose vehicles? You're looking at stepping away from VC angels because it's the lowest funding timeframe we've had in, well, a decade or more, actually almost 2008.
Yep. So there's actually a Harvard Business Review case study about this, particularly with women founders. So we used to get about 3% of the VC money. Now we get 1%. And I think it's even lower than 1 now. So yes, I agree. Yeah, where we've had our most success is companies that want to diversify their portfolio. Manufacturers, they believe in the technology, they're in the industry, they know what's out there, they know what's not out there. And so they're a fantastic resource to connect with. Ginger Cantor asked on here, do we ever feel like we wasted time? No. This company is way bigger than me. And I believe that the reason why we are at the place that we're at is because of all these failures. You have to anticipate the failures. It is never going to be a linear, it's never going to be a linear process. I'm sorry?
Sorry, so yeah, I have to respond to that. I should have put, Rob, did you feel like you were wasting your time?
Yeah.
More on that recombinant, and I get that you were, it wasn't to you, because I get that you have to, get to MVP or fail fast, whatever. So I agree with that. But as a consultant, where you have a limited number of hours and other projects that you can certainly work on, did you feel like you were wasting your time and you'd never apply those particular skills again? And so you're missing out on time you could have invested in another product that actually hits the market. And that's where I find I am right now. I'm like, I don't want to be involved all the time anymore in things that I know are a waste of my time. I really want to be involved in something that gets to the market.
That was an interesting time of my life. I was young. I had been at 3 different startup biotech companies that all went out of business.
Mm-hmm.
One of them didn't technically go out of business. They were sort of repurposed as a contract manufacturer for Merck.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're known as a company you might all know, Regeneron Pharmaceuticals.
Mm-hmm.
So every single company I worked for during that time period went on to get a product to market, except Abbott. That was the only company that didn't have a product that went to market. All of them have gone on to, be very big blockbuster drugs that have made billions.
Great.
The one job that I took at that particular time was Abbott, because I wanted to be a consultant at 23.
Yeah.
And so there was an ego thing that was involved. And anybody that knows me is not surprised at what I chose. I mean, there was a little bit of money involved and, the private jet that I got to fly around in and shit. But the job that I turned down was working for Bill Gates running a company.
Man.
In hindsight, I've never told anybody that what I turned down.
Wow.
So what did I choose wisely? I was out in Seattle. I would have been down the corner, around the corner from where Joe used to live, and I would have worked for Bill Gates in a startup company that he funded.
Did you interview with him? Robert, did you interview with him?
No, he didn't waste his time on it. He invested in the company, and I was reporting to the CEO, and he was like, "Yeah, you'd be my COO, and you'd help me run this company."
Nice.
And the guy that did it ended up running one of the major biotech companies as CEO, so that would have been my pathway.
Yeah.
I would have probably ended up at at Amgen or Genetics Institute or something like that, running a company. And what it ended up happening is I started 5 consulting businesses in a row.
Yeah.
It just choices made, and took me a very different path, it was much less lucrative money-wise, but it was a lot more exciting.
Well, and I understand that. I just wonder because now, right, there's so much work, but honestly, I've been approached by different companies and I'm like, it's never going to fly. you're shaky, you have no strategy. And I was in a number of companies that just couldn't make it or failed in late stage trials in the 90s. And I was like, what the heck? Well, because they were led only by engineers or scientists who had absolutely no idea how to get to the market. And I'm like, what are they missing? I went back to business school to figure out, you know, operations and management and finances and the commercial part of it.
Yeah.
Because it was too frustrating to be in companies, even if I learned a lot, biotech, biopharmaceutical, implants, that couldn't get their product to market and really didn't want to investigate why they couldn't get the product to market. So that's why it really wasn't met anybody else like Alyssa or, you know, Sue. It just, do you think, you know, I just want to be involved with something that has a good chance if you're not making headway on that.
So, and that's, you know, that's a good segue. We're at the end of the hour. And, but one thing in learning about whether or not you want to be in part of a company is transparency. Above all, if you feel like you're with a company that is transparent, you're going to get a lot further, a lot faster. And that's why I feel like my company didn't waste any time. We pivoted and we pivoted quickly. We made changes and we made changes quickly, and we had partners that allowed us to do so. Above all, what do you think was the most important thing everyone got out of this in your own opinions? Because there's some people that didn't start from the beginning.
I just like the process that we just went through. It was rather kind of grassroots, where someone comes up with an idea and then everybody starts to add more information. It's the icing on the cake to me. You know, I don't know where exactly this conversation started. It's about 5 minutes late, but now we've covered so much stuff that's important to me. And if you've been a CEO for more than a month, if you can set your ego aside, you realize there's a lot that you don't know, and it's important. And you're not the expert, so you need to find someone you can trust, and then listen to them and get the hell out of the way and let them do their work. I used to be, I've got to do everything. 20 years ago, you know, I got to control everything. And then you realize you have control over nothing except maybe your next breath. Everything else, you have to trust people. And if you've worked with them enough to where you trust them, they'll take care of stuff, because everybody wants to succeed and do a good job. So yeah, great session today.
Awesome. Thank you, Chris. Yep, we and knowing your weaknesses, full transparency with your team, trusting your team. And if you have the weaknesses, Wash U was the best thing I ever did. I knew that I was lacking a finance background. And so I went and got my MBA, and I got it from what poets and quants call the #1 entrepreneurial program in the world. Yeah, it was a lot of money, but it was exponentially valuable, and the network was phenomenal. And so I'm sure Joe can say that about Wharton. And I tell you what, invest in yourself, because if you're not going to invest in yourself, nobody else will. And then Maren, you said, did you want to close it out?
Oh, Maren, every week now we have your, yeah. In the meanwhile, Sue, did you have a last comment?
Yeah, I like the idea where you have to quit engineering and finally get your product to market. And that's what we're doing right now. It's just been a long road, and I'm holding my breath and hoping for the best.
And just remember, your beta, you can always do a beta, and you may not even have to do a 510K with the beta, because you can demonstrate the improvement was needed. So just get it to market, see what the market likes, see what the minimum, make sure that the market gets it in 30 seconds, because if you don't, it is way too expensive to have a sales force. When
we've done clinical trials, human factor studies, and working with the largest needle company in the world, and they get it. And we're gonna go visit with them in about 3 weeks. They've invited us up to New Jersey to spend the afternoon and show us our final product and show it how it works. So we're getting excited about that.
I know that we're wrapping, but you just triggered something for me, Sue. Your work, you have a strategic partnership with the largest player in your space. And I know that Michael is working on something that could benefit from the eyes of the largest player in his space. Yet there's a hesitancy that, how do you know they're just not going to steal your idea? if they ever tried to, and you have, you know, patent protection, whatever, they could, you know, just make you bleed with legal fees that you'll never be able to cover. How did you take that leap?
It was scary, but my CFO introduced me to the right people. And we've been working with this group for about almost 3 years now. You know, people change and go up in the ladder, but the fact that they believed in what I was doing, and there's got to be some form of trust and mutual understanding and respect. And I think they're a trusted company that wouldn't go out there. And we've got like 4 patents and a international, what is it, PCT. So that would be really, really hard for them to steal it. And yeah, they could steal it and it'd be in litigation for the rest of my life. But it's about trust.
Trust and transparency. I think that's the biggest
Yes,
takeaway.
and communication.
Yep. Trust, transparency. Yep. And knowing your weaknesses, and everybody knowing their weaknesses. I think those are probably the 3 biggest things. So I think we can wrap up. Joe, thanks for reaching out. I'm happy
I'm
to.
glad you mentioned more than a year ago about the great founding fails, and I've had it on my list for all that time. Because we were going to have a speaker today that we had to push back a week. This is, I think, International Sepsis Awareness Month. We're going to talk about sepsis next week. And the following week is Nick Anderson's going to talk to us about when you have billings associated with being inpatient. So that may be interesting for some folks as well. Here in the States, it's Labor Day weekend. I don't know if anyone has some plans. I'm going to go singing. There's like a barbershop camp near where I'm living, and it's been a while since I've raised my voice in song, so I'm looking forward to that. I hope you have some good plans, perhaps a barbecue, and I'll see you all next week. Thanks, everyone. Bye.